Alright, so I'm going to have to speak about care and the situation with the picture that Shelley Robinson admitted to destroying. Um, I don't have a friend or family member to help advocate for me, so I'm forced to go in alone. Because I am a vulnerable adult, I'm supposed to be allowed to have a friend or family member going with me. Instead, they do everything they can to try to separate me from my friend or family. When a crime is committed against me, it doesn't matter who committed that crime. It is still a crime. It doesn't matter if it's a police officer, if it's one of your coworkers at care. And when you refuse to do your job as a mandatory reporter because you don't want your coworkers to think less of you, that's not okay. Because you're afraid of losing your job, well, that's illegal. They can't fire you for doing your job as a mandatory reporter. Then, of course, they'll find something, won't they? I've gotten to hear that one as well. So the situation is, I was trying to turn in abuse to mandatory reporters who were instead treating me like I was schizophrenic and delusional, not taking the situation seriously. One guy, what was his name? Connors, I think, put his hands behind his head and put his feet up on the desk and leaned back in his chair, and he wasn't listening to a word I had to say, and he wasn't going to. He was a peer support worker at CARE, and he refused to do his job as a mandatory reporter, like all the rest of them as well. Miss Shelley put a slight show up a couple weeks ago about a situation with my stalker. Now, since then, I was told that there's a guy in town that might have bought his camper around the time that I was trying to turn him in, a guy named James Murphy. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. There's a lot of evidence of the abuse from James Murphy. The thing is, I've had to try to turn in CARE, I've had to try to turn in TFCC, I've tried to turn in the police. Now, first of all, there's the evidence with TFCC. That's Tillamook Family Counseling Center. Now, these people tried to have me diagnosed as schizophrenic instead of looking up the words Natalie Bollinger. Enough said. Simple. I even tried looking it up on my phone and showing it to them. They're not going to look at that. They told me it's not their job, they're not mandatory reporters. Well, then it turns out that the Natalie Bollinger thing, thank goodness for Deputy Taylor, and I'm sorry this is such a long story to get into all the felonies that Shelley's committed, but she's involved in quite a bit. She's also already a convicted felon, and she's the peer support worker that I'm supposed to be working with. I have to worry that her and her coworkers will retaliate against me for trying to turn them in and for speaking out publicly about the abuse, about the neglect, about the fact that when I tried to turn in the assaults before, this is where much of the issue is, I was sent around in mental health circles. I spent all of my disability money, or the majority of my disability money, every month running around all the places they told me to go. And of course, they were going to look up some phone numbers for me, right? The phone numbers that they looked up for me in these other places, well, I recorded the phone calls with them, and all these places told me that I have to go to CARE, or I have to, they literally referred me back to Tillamook County and said they couldn't do nothing. Oregon law says that we're supposed to deal with it in county, basically. So, small community like this, The police, the people at CARE, and the people at Tillamook Family Counseling Center all work together. And when they break the law, they all work together. Unfortunately for them, one of their deputies did not get the memo that you're supposed to ignore any and all of the crimes that are committed against an inmate. By the time that I was arrested, the police, the sheriff's department, CARE, and multiple other places were already aware that the Natalie Bollinger situation was not a delusion. But by that point, I was trying to turn them in because of the repeated assaults that I'd been enduring, tried to turn in, and then been harmed for. Like them pretending that I'm schizophrenic and sending me around in circles. The police send me to CARE. CARE sends me to TFCC. TFCC sends me to the police. The police say you should have gotten a hold of us first. I say I did. There's the destruction of evidence. Now, this is one of the things that Shelly and I were supposed to go over. Now, what happened with the destruction of the evidence? It's not just that picture, by the way. So, all of the evidence of how I was treated, when I went in there to try to turn in people assaulting me, people like Andrew Wolness, people like Molly, people who were stalking me, like Molly and Andrew Wolness and James Murphy. Now, you've gotten to see on my channel some of the threats against myself and my sister and my niece. I've had to deal with this since, I want to say, October or November of 2017. Or October or November of 2016. In some form or another. Either in emails or telephone calls or... You know, there was 1 week before Natalie was killed. I only had 3 people call me in a week, and that's a lot for me. All 3 of them were to threaten me. So what does this have to do with Miss Shelley? Well, the abuse that I'm having to deal with is because police in Colorado and Nebraska and many other places tried to do exactly the same thing as Tillamook did. They want to try to brush it under the rug, and that's what Miss Shelley wants to do. She wants to pretend that all of the abuse in the past doesn't exist. All of the abuse by her and her coworkers because they wanted to make bad assumptions instead of looking something up. Instead of taking a look at it. Hey, I'm coming to you because you're mandatory reporters. The cops won't do their jobs unless I have an advocate. You're supposed to be advocates. Then they tell me, oh no, we're not advocates. We only advocate for housing. Okay? You don't care if we're being abused. Well, it turns out they are mandatory reporters, and they do have to do that job if we're being abused. So, before, I spent 15 months locked up on false charges because a man who had threatened to kill me on multiple occasions, and that's recorded on my YouTube channel, by the way. A guy who threatened to kill me on multiple occasions, threw objects at me, and a lot of other things. Came at me with a pole more than once. I was scared. I was on my knees. I couldn't run and get away. There was no way I was going to be able to gather up my stuff fast enough. I was holding a sign trying to get some money. Get my car out of impound. It was impounded because I was arrested for improper use of 911, for calling the cops about assaults and abuse, people threatening to kill me, and of course the violations of the protection order by Andrew Wolness and his friends. I also told them who some of the witnesses were. The cops didn't care. They had a sarcastic attitude with me and got nippy and snippy with me and very disrespectful, and it was horrible. So, I have PTSD. I am diagnosed with it. By the way, if it wasn't for the fact that I'm having issues with keeping any sort of lighting in here that works decently, I do have paperwork from my mental health providers. Now, here's the thing. They abused their power when I had to try to turn them in. They abused their power. It's as simple as that. Deputy Sadler lied. We caught him over 30 times between the body camera and the, what do you call that? The grand jury report and his official report. So I spent 15 months in jail. And while I was in jail, there was that picture of me with apparently some mean stuff written on it, according to Miss Shelley. And it was on the wall, I gather, for quite a while, the way that she made it sound. And then, after I was released from jail, and of course I was abused quite a bit in jail, TFCC and CARE came in, and of course it was that guy who had stuck his hands behind his head and leaned back in the chair and basically just talked over me and James. That was the same guy who came in with a woman named Rachel from TFCC. So he was from CARE, she was from TFCC. I filled out some paperwork for housing for them, which is always what I end up doing. They want me to fill out paperwork for housing, okay, but there's a point where we have to move past the working on housing to the point where we're focusing on, hey, I'm continuing to take abuse while you are procrastinating with housing. This has been their go-to since 2022. Now, there is evidence of abuse by her and her coworkers, and she's refusing to look at any of it, I assume. She's not going to help to turn in any of the abuse committed against me. Her and her coworkers showed that very loud and clear last time. So, she told me about 2 months ago, this is when apparently Russell was not able to be my peer support worker because he was trying to help me turn stuff in. He started to listen, and there's a difference between Shelly and I and Mr. Russell and I. Russell and I had kind of a good relationship going on. And I'm not talking about sexual, I'm talking about as a peer support worker. And he took the abuse seriously. He took the fact that I'm being abused and these allegations seriously. And he did look at the videos and he did not turn them in like he should have. But the thing is that Russell was trying to help, and he was also doing the right thing by looking at that and verifying that it was real. Just like Deputy Taylor did something here that no other deputy or officer did in any of my other court dates or court cases or any of that. When they try to pretend like the Natalie Bollinger thing is a schizophrenic delusion and I automatically lose in court because nobody bothers to look whether it's true or not up. They just want to assume that I'm making it up or that nobody could possibly ever be abused in this way. When they realize I've been on A&E, yeah, that changes things quite a bit. So what do I have to worry about with Miss Shelley? I have to worry that they're going to do the same things that they always do when I try to turn in these kind of abuses. They're required by law to turn it in. The other thing is it's unsafe to turn it into the local police. I am afraid for a reason. The word for that is apprehensive. Now we're going to go over PTSD first before we get any further into this. That's post-traumatic stress disorder. Now there's 4 stages of trauma response. The first one is acute disorganization. And this is the only one that I'm focusing on at the moment. The reason that I'm focusing on this one for the moment is because I am abused so often that I am in this constant state. Now let's go over this. It says shortly after trauma, and the victim shows shock, inability to concentrate, sleeping and eating changes, fear, helplessness, shame, anxiety, rage. They don't necessarily go through all of those, and everybody may experience those different stages differently. Of course, if you show any signs of those as a homeless male, it may get you shot by a police officer. That is reality. A lot of those things also happen to be things that people who are your predators in a public position try to confuse others into believing that those things are the same as schizophrenia. No, schizophrenia requires very specifically that you be hallucinating these things. If the victim has recorded evidence, like I do, it's obviously not a delusion. It's obviously not schizophrenia. It's obviously something else. They are having a PTSD reaction. When you try to treat them like they're a liar or they're making it up, this is the most disgusting thing. Or you want to pretend like, as every mandated reporter does, they want to do this, it's in the past thing. No, it's ongoing. The abuse at care is ongoing. Now, when she told me that uh, she destroyed all the mean stuff that was in my file, and she also told me that that picture had eventually been taken down and put in a drawer, and she had just recently found it and shredded it. So she destroyed the evidence, and of course, they got these signs all over that say you're not allowed to record. And this is something that the lawyers tell me I need to always record. Every lawyer tells me that, dude, you need to record. If they're doing these things to you, you need to record it. They're breaking the law. They're committing felonies. The problem is getting somebody to listen beyond that, because these attorneys are also telling me you need a friend or family member that knows what's going on. You have a friend or family member you can tell this to. I've got plenty of people I try to tell. Does that count? No, I don't have anybody. But anxiety, well, they want to pretend that that's just paranoia for no reason. And that paranoia for no reason, when there is an actual reason, is called what? Apprehensive. You know, at that stage, people are like, why the hell is this happening to me? And yeah, to this day, I'm still dealing with that. Why is my evidence not seen by the courts? Why is my evidence not good enough for the news? When their slander is good enough to destroy my life and result in people physically assaulting me everywhere that I go. So then these predators, they want you to forget about their predatory acts and behaviors by the it's in the past thing. Or the, oh, we don't have to look at evidence, we believe you. Well, if that's the case, and I'm telling you about abuse, then you need to turn it in right away. If you're not turning it in right away, you're breaking the law. Now, here's the thing with mandatory reporters. If you're not going at your job as a mandatory reporter with the same kind of energy that you would if your daughter was fucking raped and nobody was listening, you're not doing your goddamn job. Plain and simple. That also goes for any friends or family members. All right? This doesn't just go for children. If it is an elderly person or a disabled person, and I am a disabled person, it goes equally. We need an immediate response. It's not that we're being irrational. is that this is literally the only thing that protects us from police officers who want to look the other way. They are more likely to help that little girl, and thank goodness. But that does not give them the right to look the other way when we are harmed, when an elderly person or a disabled person is harmed. And I was that child, all right? When I was a kid, I had to go through all sorts of abuse, physical, sexual, you name it. Now I'm having to deal with the fact that in all of these situations before Deputy Taylor, all of these police officers and public pretenders and so on and so forth all wanted to play off the pretendy belief in this schizophrenia crap. Because in each one of those situations, these people knew that the situation with Natalie Bollinger was very real, that it was not schizophrenia, but they chose to play that off. They chose to allow people to harm me, and I had PTSD reactions. Yes, I am afraid. Moving on from the PTSD to the next subject. That's what moving on is, okay? Not just moving on as a general statement. No. All right, I'm autistic. That's trash. That's lazy English. What am I supposed to infer from that? If your daughter comes to you and says, I was raped, are you going to tell her a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush? Are you going to tell her, oh, you just need to love yourself? These are the things that my friends told me when I came to them about being assaulted. And you know what the police said to me? You just need to man up. Or I have real police work to do. This is not worth my time. Why don't you get a hold of her and try to work this out as adults? That's not going to happen. All right, we got a drug addict. A drug addict, yes, Natalie Bollinger, a drug addict, who is still doing drugs, getting all sorts of attention, playing it up. I'm having to take abuse over this. This is not a little thing. Before Natalie was killed, all these people want to pretend that I was a stalker. Absolutely not. I was the one stalked, and there's lots of evidence of it. I get abused everywhere I go over the Natalie Bollinger situation. That includes mandatory reporters refusing to do their jobs, resulting in me being harmed again and again and again. That's how it goes from a person being assaulted just once and their assailant going to jail, to somebody being assaulted repeatedly and having to be afraid to go to the police, having to be afraid to go to care, having to be afraid to go to TFCC or any of these other places. Now, of course, I have some papers here that are from my actual psychological evaluations after the piece of paper from Deputy Taylor. And these psychological evaluations take into account the Natalie Bollinger situation. None of them say that I'm schizophrenic. None of them say that I'm delusional. And the thing is that even prior to this, the police had told the hospital in Longmont that I was that I was schizophrenic. The hospital, although they wrote it down as if that officer could diagnose schizophrenia, they can't. The doctor also covered her own ass. She wrote down that they did not observe any signs of schizophrenia. Now, here's one of my evaluations. This is from Forensic Evaluation Service. What else does it say on there? Oregon State Hospital. And of course, it says very specifically in this that I am not schizophrenic or delusional. He actually wrote about the Natalie Bollinger situation. Do you know why he did that? Because of that piece of evidence from Deputy Taylor. There's three of these, by the way. One of them by Dr. Leslie Carter, who is also a forensic psychologist and a licensed forensics psychologist as well. She's got like 3 or 4 different forensics titles, which is kind of nice. But she's also an autism specialist. Now, my autism specialist was supposed to be able to show that I'm being abused because I'm a disabled person, basically, and that includes by Moss and Dijon, that they are taking advantage of me because I'm vulnerable, and that's very true. Um, what this has to do with Shelley is that after I was released, I was sent again to care. So I've been going to care. I went to care every day for 4 months. One of the things they tried to pretend is that people didn't want to do their jobs as mandatory reporters because of my attitude. So I went in there every single day. I made them laugh. I'm following my instructions by checking the mail every day. And one of the things that sucks is that I am dependent upon an agency that is likely to retaliate against me for trying to turn in Shelley and Melissa. So one of the ways that they might do that is to play victim and to prevent me from having access to my mail, which would prevent me from having access to my money. Um, by denying me services because their employees committed crimes against me, well, that's not okay either. But I have to be afraid of that kind of retaliation. I have to be afraid of group retaliation, where multiples of them try to overwhelm me, which is easy to do for somebody who's got PTSD or somebody who's autistic, and I'm both. And they'll just talk over me, 2 or 3 people at a time, or they will tone bully me, or they will ask 4 or 5 questions in rapid succession, not allow me to answer any of them, and then accuse me of not being able to answer. No, you're not allowing me to. Now then there's the fact that Shelley told me that she destroyed all of the mean stuff that was in my file. That would be what? What did she destroy? How much of my file still says that I went to them because I was being assaulted and threatened? And mind you, you can see the videos of me going to care before this happened when I was recording everything. You can see the videos of these situations. I'm going in there trying to turn in abuse to mandatory reporters in all of these situations. And they wouldn't do their jobs. They wanted to pretend that they were stupid, or they wanted to get an attitude with me and gang up on me and talk over me and not allow me to speak and grill me with an attitude. Yeah, that's going to shut down a victim with PTSD, and they know it. It's also a majority women, which means that they're going to gang up together, and the men who are there are going to do what the women want, or whatever the women are doing, they're going to go along with. Now, I have to turn in crimes that were committed by the police department, the sheriff's department, CARE, and TFCC. One of those is some paperwork that I have here, and this paperwork is from Tillamook Family Counseling Centers. This is evidence that they were trying to treat me like I was schizophrenic and pretend that it was a delusion through half of it, um, over the Natalie Bollinger situation. So, through half of it, the reason for that is because halfway through what's in here, um, Natalie Bollinger became an actual topic that they no longer could ignore and pretend was a schizophrenic delusion. It became very real when Deputy Taylor admitted that he'd seen the A&E segment. So at that point, their whole pretenses of me being schizophrenic went right out the window. Now, had Deputy Taylor been there in any other agency, anywhere else in America that I had to go to turn this shit in, it could have been stopped way back then. Now, one of the issues I'm having to deal with now is that, well, the second half of this, And mind you, I gave this to Miss Shelley. This is one of the points of contention, by the way. This is evidence that, first of all, at least half of their visits out there aren't in here. They literally omitted any information. This is the stuff they sent to my attorney. They literally omitted any information about me trying to turn in the crimes. Almost half of the visits there are not accounted for. Um, it does show that the first half that they were treating me like I was schizophrenic over Natalie Bollinger in specific. They state my friend in some of this. And it's BS. So, not only that, this stuff was used in court to harm me. The parts that are missing. Isn't that amazing? Stuff that's not even in there is used to harm me. It's stuff that was destroyed, visits that we had. Like, for example, one of the people from TFCC who came out to see me, um, none of her stuff is in this entire report. Not one of our visits. Meanwhile, she was going to help me to turn in the abuse as a mandatory reporter, but she said that she wouldn't do it as a mandatory reporter because she didn't think it would do any good because she knows that the people in Portland who are supposed to investigate this just aren't going to. Yeah. I do know that woman's name. It's written down in some of the paperwork I wrote down while I was in jail. Now, the reason that this document is important is that Shelley was going to go over this with me because I was going to show her the crimes that were committed. I was going to explain to her about why this is important and try to turn in TFCC for Medicare and Medicaid fraud, as well as, well, they intentionally omitted information, a lot of it. Now, the second half of this is after they realized that Natalie Bollinger was not a delusion, that the fact that it was on A&E also was not a delusion, and there was also several other things that Deputy Taylor was able to verify, like that it goes back quite a ways, like years, close to a decade now. So all of the things where I went in because I was assaulted by somebody in the community over Natalie Bollinger, that they wanted to pretend were schizophrenic delusions, it turns out those things are true. They should not have bullied me. They shouldn't have done any of the things that they did to me, and they certainly shouldn't have started doing the whole just housing thing. Because, all right, I'll fill out the housing paperwork, but I am here because of abuse. The police sent me to mental health again because I was abused and trying to turn it in, and they claim you're supposed to help me. They claim that you at TFCC or you at CARE are supposed to help me. When I was in jail, people from TFCC and CARE came in to try to, basically to try to do anything they could to antagonize me, knowing that I have PTSD and Asperger's, to try to send me into a mental breakdown so they could try to push the schizophrenic thing over and over and over again. It didn't work, and, well, the psychological evaluations, the three that I had, showing very clearly that I'm not schizophrenic, that these things are happening, and I am being abused over it, well, that's a real big help, but now nobody wants to look at it. Miss Shelley claimed that she'd already seen my medical file, so she wasn't going to listen to any of the stuff that was in those three evaluations. And as far as this goes, the deal for her to have access to this, which is a bunch of slander where they try to basically frame me as a schizophrenic, is that she sit down with me and go over it, because these are crimes that were committed against me by multiple people at TFCC. Meanwhile, crimes have been committed against me by multiple people at CARE and multiple people at the police department too. So, whatever, right? No big deal. The problem is that after I got out of jail and they knew that I wasn't schizophrenic, and it's in the courts, and then the court's paperwork from the court's assessor, one of these people is the top forensic evaluator for the state, okay? So, Yeah, when he says I'm not schizophrenic, you should probably listen. So now what they're doing is they're trying to brush under the rug and hide the fact that they committed so many felonies. Now here's the other thing. The important thing about that picture that Miss Shelley admitted to destroying in a shredder. That was about 2 months ago. She wants to say that's in the past. No, you destroyed evidence. See, that's evidence that I was taken as a joke. Even if they assumed that I was schizophrenic, does that make it okay to make me into a joke? To take a picture of me and post it up on the wall with some mean stuff on it? That's absolutely not okay, especially not in an office full of mandated reporters who are supposed to protect us. And to put it up as a joke to laugh at, that is inappropriate. That's not something that should be done. If you think that they're schizophrenic and you're posting their face up in your office and laughing about it, and even if you don't laugh, it's still meant as a joke. Now imagine you find out that person is not schizophrenic, and all of the stuff that you and your coworkers wanted to take not seriously is suddenly a very serious thing. And it wasn't a diagnosis of schizophrenia at any point. It was the insinuation of schizophrenia by calling me mentally ill. This denied me from showing evidence in court so much and allowed police to destroy evidence of their own wrongdoing. Now, there's evidence in this right here of TFCC's wrongdoing. Shelley said that she read it. That's not what I gave it to her for. I'm glad that she read it. That's good. Now she needs to go over it with me. Like I said, there were crimes that were committed, and they put me at risk. Having to go to my predators, by name, my predators for help, puts me at risk. But this is what I'm forced to do because I am prevented from turning them in and having it being taken seriously because I have no advocate. Now, Shelley did say that she was going to turn in one situation a couple of weeks ago. Now, this is after she destroyed evidence, and mind you, I can't just push for the information about that. I have to allow it to come out naturally, so to speak. These people are already up with understanding that you need to be straightforward with me, and I will do everything that I can as Wile E. fucking Coyote to record it or to get that information. If you tell me something, I'll try to get you to say it again. The reason I try to get you to say it again is because I was not recording the first time. So, I'm being sent to Miss Shelley, who is one of the people who was a part of this 2 years ago. Because, mind you, I've been out of jail for 6 months and I was in jail for like 15 months. They still keep the housing thing around in circles for this last 6 months. All right. I don't have housing yet. We haven't done anything extra on housing, not since Russell. Shelley hasn't done anything extra with housing. It was all done by Russell. All of the actual helpful stuff came from Russell. And all of the stuff that Russell helped me with was to help me get housing. That's what Russell was working on. But that also needs to include the abuse. Nobody should be forced to do such desperate things because they're being sent to their predators by name for help. I'm having to go to the people at CARE who did these things to me to begin with, who posted that sign up and made those jokes, whatever it is that they thought was appropriate at the time. Yes, many of them got very sarcastic with me. Later on, when you bring it up, do they say, oh, well, I was an asshole? No, they say, oh, I was just making a joke. Okay, fine, it was just a joke. we'll call it a joke. Fine. But that doesn't make it okay that the abuse from TFCC happened and that nothing is being done about it. Or that the abuse at CARE happened and that nothing is being done about it. Or that the police, same thing, and nothing is being done about it. And then, of course, all of these different peoples and places, like the second half of this paper here, the second half of it, they continue to try to insinuate that these are delusions. Because by this point, they knew that I wasn't delusional or schizophrenic and that the Natalie Bollinger situation was true. So they just stopped bringing up the my friend part, the Natalie Bollinger part. The beginning half of this, they're trying to infer that I'm schizophrenic or delusional because I believe that I was on TV and the Natalie Bollinger shit and all that. You guys know that's true. Absolutely true. The problem is that at CARE, at TFCC, the sheriff's department and the police department, the moment I go in there to try to turn in abuse, they play stupid. They won't do their jobs. I'm still trying to turn in Miss Shelley. There's more of a chance that I'm going to be bullied, harassed, and intimidated than there is that they'll actually do their job and listen. There's more of a chance that they'll try to pretend that it's my fault that I was harmed than it is that they will actually listen. There's more chance that they will play victim. There's more chance that they will raise their voice and, of course, threaten me with the police or whatever else it is they want to threaten me with. They'll pretend that they're afraid because I'm trying to turn them into the police. That, of course, this is the same exact thing that Natalie did. Are you guys seeing a pattern with these women? I try to turn them into the police and the courts, and they pretend I'm trying to kill them. They pretend I'm trying to harm them. People are actually harming me, and I'm trying to turn in actual harm that I'm enduring and trying to get help from the people who police are sending me to. That's right, police told me to talk to Natalie. Police told me to talk to her mother, to try to reach out to her family and tell them what's happening, tell them the harm that I'm going through, because they didn't want to deal with it. They didn't want to do their jobs. Police in this town sent me to CARE and TFCC. The cops in the Hood River sent me to basically the mimic of these services in Hood River. And they did exactly the same thing. They treated me like it was a schizophrenic delusion and sent me around in circles, eating up all of my time. I had to record the abuse. They wouldn't look at the recordings of the abuse. They just talked in circles. Told me I needed to call another agency. This is what happens when you have to turn in your predators to themselves. First of all, they're not going to let you finish what you're saying. They're going to continually interrupt you. Second of all, they might have their friends and buddies standing around and they might all start talking over you so that you don't get to tell the truth because they're all going to talk a false narrative over you. Very specifically because these places would not take physical assaults against me seriously and would not look at evidence showing those physical assaults against me. Somehow, because they want to keep all this stuff out of the courts and prevent me from turning it in and move on from it. Well, that allows the next time that I have to go through this, and there will be a next time because of the Natalie Bollinger situation. The next time that I have to go through this, they're going to go right back to claiming and inferring and trying to push the schizophrenic narrative. And I'm going to have to go through all of this over again, and my predators will get away again. And everything that I had worked hard to accumulate will be gone again. I've repeatedly had to change my phone number because predators keep calling me to threaten to kill me and threaten to kill my sister. So I change my number, and guess what happens then? Then more predators who I'm trying to turn in pretend that because I changed my phone number and had to call them from a different phone number while they were still my friend, that it meant that I was stalking them. And this is one of the things, like, for example, Will. Will was my friend for years. He also was a police officer in Denver. Well, actually, his wife was my friend for years. Now, of course, when it was a situation where I tried to turn him in, all of a sudden, everything between before Natalie was killed when he was involved and that point, all of a sudden, it's all non existent. It's all stuff that he's going to twist and manipulate to try to pretend like I was some sort of a predator, that the whole time he was telling me, don't call me, don't call my family, don't get a hold of me, don't get a hold of my family, and this, that, and the other, and blah, 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 blah. Which, by the way, if Jessica Martindale talks to me, I'm going to talk to her back. I love Jessica. She's great. So, the situation here is I'm dealing with people who are supposed to be professionals. They did not act professional. And after the fact, I'm supposed to go back to these predators and hope they're not going to do the same thing again. They're doing the same thing again, refusing to look at evidence of abuse, refusing to turn in that abuse as mandatory reporters, refusing to take it seriously, sending me around in the same circles. And now I have less resources than I had before, because prior to this, TFCC and CARE were trying to assist the police department and sheriff's department in their case. So all of my predators worked together and they still lost the case. They still had to drop the charges and let me walk. And I'm still having to try to turn in that I'm still having to deal with threats of assaults, threats against my friends and family's lives. And I literally cannot record 24/7. I can't. It eats up a whole bunch of data, and then I have to go buy another data card. All of this stuff costs money. Turning in your daughter being raped should never cost money. It should be a matter of calling it in with your daughter and staying there with your daughter so that she is allowed to safely make a police report. That's what it takes. That's the same thing that when your grandma is raped in fucking the nursing home or beaten up in the nursing home, or your autistic son is being beaten up at school. That photograph that she admitted to destroying represents the fact that it was a joke to their office. The thing is, when she says she got rid of all of the mean stuff in my file, what mean stuff is she talking about? And how do I know that's what she destroyed? How do I know she didn't just go through and find all the stuff where staff members wrote down that I had a delusion that I knew some girl named Natalie Bollinger and that I was on A&E? What parts did she destroy? A bunch of stuff that, well, I need access to take them to court. But all of these people know I don't have the money for a civil lawyer. They know I don't have the money to buy all of the evidence, which is what it takes. The media was able to buy evidence and show just little bits and pieces. Boy, I'd like to buy that evidence and show you what really happened. Like A&E, when they show little bits and clips of me talking to the police. How about they release the entire video? The entire thing. The whole thing. Because I don't have the money to buy it. I'm not allowed access to it. But that also shows that I was victimized by those investigators in Natalie Bollinger's case. That they dangled a disabled homeless man out there for people to harm whenever they wanted. Meanwhile, I was forced into homelessness because Natalie Bollinger was killed, which, might I remind you, Joseph Michael Lopez killed Natalie. So why was I forced into homelessness? I was having to stay with people who were taking advantage of me for my finances because I get disability money. I was trying to turn that in when I found out that Natalie was killed. Or, sorry, when I found out that Natalie had disappeared. I didn't find out that she was dead until almost a week later. Now, there's all these recordings of people assaulting me over and over again. I've posted them up over and over again on my YouTube channel, which, by the way, I still have to try to get back, which means that I need help with the whole electronic side of it. Y'all think that I am some computer guy who knows how to do all of this. No, I fuck around until I mess something up, usually. But at least I admit when I screw something up, and I do so immediately so that we can move forward towards an actual solution. I'm likely to get victim blamed and victim shamed for trying to turn this in because that's their MO, or change the subject and get angry with me when turning in the ongoing abuse, including the abuse and crimes committed by them, is just as important as filling out their paperwork for housing. What do I need to do for housing? All right? What do I need to do for that more than what I've already done? What more can I do? They're not giving me more papers to fill out. We're not making calls to any of these places, and none of these places are making calls to us. So I've continued to try to turn them in this entire time, trying to get somebody to advocate. I'm supposed to talk to their head honcho in charge. We've tried that before and been sent around in circles, haven't we? Well, if you've watched my channel, you know this. Yes, I have a real YouTube channel with lots of evidence. Much of the evidence that I've gotten to show you on here came from my actual YouTube. This one exists so that when I get the money to pay Google, then Google will allow me the more free space that is needed so that I can actually accept and send emails. Because right now, if you send me an email, it won't do anything. But once I've paid that bill, then I can send and receive those, and then I can pay the stuff that I need to pay in order to get my all of that crap back, hopefully. But in each one of these cases, I'm sent to agencies that are supposed to help out people who are poor, and they're ignoring the abuse that we're having to go through. These people have been made aware that people have been assaulting me and threatening to kill me, and have done so repeatedly. They also tried to use a situation where, all right, so before I was arrested and spent 15 months in there, I was supposed to send a bunch of evidence to an investigator with TFCC, right? So I sent her a whole bunch of the threats that I'd received. And then, of course, I'm in court when they claim that I threatened to kill her. That's right. None of these threats were threats that I was sending to her as threats toward her. I don't know her. These are literally screenshots of people threatening to kill me, people sending me pictures of guns and knives saying that they're going to kill me, people saying that they're going to kill and dismember my niece, and in between a whole bunch of those, I was typing the stuff that I had to deal with from folks on the internet and folks in real life, like over the Stormy situation. People were telling me shit like, well, you're a man, you need to do your job. That's human trafficking. He's trying to rape her. Did the cops listen? No. Did I try to turn it in? Yeah. Uh, because these people didn't do their jobs. I can't function because my predators are still out there and they're still up to their antics. I have to be afraid to turn in mandatory reporters in Tillamook, Oregon, because if I try to turn them in, their friends and coworkers, and that includes police, will go out of their way to help them to get away with it. You don't want your friends getting in trouble. Now, there's the stuff in here that shows that they went out of their way to lie and to intentionally misrepresent the situation. And then there's, of course, the evidence that they destroyed evidence or omitted evidence. And then there's the evidence that Miss Shelley destroyed evidence. And they pretend that these are little things. No, this doesn't just constitute a little thing. This also shows your intentions. This shows us how seriously you took the situation. When I was having post-traumatic stress responses to frequent and ongoing abuse, and I was coming to you as care to turn in this abuse right after it happened, just like with the police, right after many of these situations happened. Yes, I was having a traumatic reaction to a traumatic situation. This is not schizophrenia. You can see the videos of me being assaulted. You can see people's fists hitting me in the head. You can see that most of the time they attack me from behind. You also get to see that they're still using Natalie Bollinger as their excuse. People are still claiming that I killed Natalie Bollinger as their excuse to assault me and to threaten my life. And then I got people who talk to me like I'm completely stupid, right? Like, how many people that care have said, after they did finally look it up, have said, oh, well, you know they found her killer, right? Yes, I know they found her killer. I reported on the fact that they found her killer a day before they announced it on the news. Yes, I know they found her killer. And yes, Andrew Wolnez knows that they found her killer. And yes, Chris Stafford knows that they found her killer. And yes, John Focius knows that they found her killer. And David Martinez knows that they found her killer. And Lynn Lothman knows that they found her killer. And Timothy Sadler knows they found her killer. And by the way, these are all, you might have guessed it, predators of mine. Lovely. Half of them are predators who assaulted me over Natalie Bollinger, and half of them are police officers I had to go to about the abuse, and later had to try to turn in. And when I had to try to turn them in, what did they do? They arrested me on false charges. Improper use of 911. You can see very plainly and clearly that these people are assaulting me in the videos. So how is that improper use of 911? Who can I go to about this abuse? Miss Shelley's just going to run me around in circles. If they refuse to look at the evidence, then no crime was committed. That's the way they view it. So I have to be afraid of them doing what they've done repeatedly, which is gang up on me and play victim. Tone bully me and talk over me.